expected some technical difficulties, but leading off our discussion today, my name is Tom McDonald. I'm the former outgoing chair and the co-chair of the subcommittee for the Nelson Mandela Award, along with Irma Russell. At first, our current chair, Zachary Kaufman, will say a few words.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. My name is Zachary Kaufman. I'm the chair of the National Human Rights section. Today we are presenting our section's Nelson Mandela Award, the second time ever that we're doing so. Thank you to all of you for being here for this very special event. A special thanks, of course, to Professor Dinah Shelton for being our awardee this year. Also special thanks to Professors Tom McDonald and, as he mentioned, his co-chair Irma Russell for so ably co-chairing the Nelson Mandela Selection Committee. Tom, as he mentioned, is also our esteemed immediate past chair of the section. Special thanks as well to our executive committee, many of whom are here today, for participating in the process of receiving nominations, for adding nominations, and then for going through the rigorous process of selecting our distinguished awardee today. I'll now turn it back over to Tom to introduce the award and also our awardee, Professor Dinah Shelton. Thank you.
Thank you, Zachary, for those kind remarks. Again, welcome. I also want to thank Zachary Kaufman. He has been our current chair, has done an excellent job this year. I want to thank him as well as my co-chair, Irma Russell, and all the members of the section executive committee for the work they did in reviewing and discussing the numerous nominations we received for this award this year. I do wish to mention that, as Zachary did, that this is the second year that we have presented this award. Our first awardee was Gabe McDougall of Ford Law School. So, this year, on behalf of the Executive Committee and the International Human Rights section, we are honored to name Professor Dinah Shelton as this year's winner of the Nelson Mandela Award. Shelton has made an outstanding contribution to international human rights. Hers is a multi-dimensional contribution. As a judge, as a human rights investigator, as a prolific international and human rights scholar, and lastly but not leastly, as an excellent law teacher. Professor Shelton has served with distinction in a judicial capacity as president and commissioner of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. She was the first American woman appointed to the Inter-American Commission and also the first president of that, first to become commission president. She also was elected as judge of the International Court of Environmental Arbitration and Conciliation. Aside from her work in a judicial capacity, she, as I had mentioned, worked really as a human rights investigator, a rapporteur in several contexts for international bodies. I would just mention a couple. She was the rapporteur for the English-speaking Caribbean, Haiti, Chile, Guatemala, Ecuador, and Ecuador. She also served as rapporteur on the rights of indigenous peoples, participating in on-site missions to the Dominican Republic, Guatemala, Suriname, and Canada. What we do, much of what we do in our work is scholarship. And Professor Shelton is one of the most prolific international law, international human rights scholars of our generation. She has written countless articles and numerous books that have received exceptional merits. I also would like to mention, as you may not know, I'm from Pace Law School. We are the environmental law school. Her path-breaking work in environmental law is remarkable. She was one of the first to argue and demonstrate that environmental protection is an international human right. And she was given our Pace Elizabeth Howe Environmental Law Award several years ago for that work. Now, aside from her scholarship, her judicial work, her important investigation as a human rights rapporteur, she has had a remarkable record as a law teacher. She has taught at Santa Clara University School of Law, Notre Dame School of Law, Stanford Law School, University of California, Berkeley, the University of Paris, the University of Strasbourg, France, and the George Washington University Law School. At George Washington, she was awarded the Manat-On Chair, an exceptionally prestigious, distinguished chair. Lastly, I just want to stress that she has inspired generations of law students to pursue work in our area of law. Professor Shelton, on behalf of the International Human Rights Section and the Executive Committee, I am delighted to present to you the Nelson Mandela Award.
See if I can get over here without tripping.
I'll move the cords as best I can.
The more so, because, as you can see, I met Nelson and Winnie Mandela in the mid-1980s. You can tell what my hairstyle. In Geneva, when he was there to thank the World Council of Churches for joining him in his fight against apartheid. And he was gentle and charismatic at the same time. And so it was an honor and a privilege to meet him and his wife there. And he went to the World Council of Churches and gave a really stunning address to them. So this was shortly after he was released from 2 decades of prison on Robben Island. Fighting to end apartheid. So that was a lesson in patience, and as those of you who know me know, that's something I fundamentally lack. In fact, I often say I'm a lawyer, not a doctor, because I have no patience. That lesson was reinforced by a comment that H. Robertson made several years later when he was the Secretary General of the International Institute of Human Rights in Strasbourg, where I worked for several years. He looked out the window one day at the magnificent cathedral in Strasbourg, and he remarked on the fact that those who worked on the bottom tier of stones, the stonemasons, would never see the cathedral rise. They would, neither would their children nor their grandchildren. The cathedral took 400 years to finish, and they're still working on it on a regular basis to keep it updated. So that even more reinforced what I learned from Mandela. So now that I've convinced you I'm older than dirt, let me tell you about a more youthful incident. I was seated next to Lord Noel Baker for a luncheon, and even though he was 92 in 1978, he could still speak extemporaneously for a half an hour without any notes. Seated next to him, I turned to him and I said, you know, I apologize, I know you won the Nobel Peace Prize in the 1950s, but I was in elementary school then, and so I really don't know what you won it for. And he smiled and smiled, and his eyes twinkled, and he said, it's because I have the good fortune to work for some very exceptional men, beginning with Lloyd George. Yes, he worked on the Treaty of Versailles. And he won the Nobel Peace Prize for his work in nuclear disarmament. Like Noel Baker, I've been blessed with many exceptional mentors and colleagues over the years. Rene Cassin, Harold Lassa, Thomas Bergenthal, Louis Sohn, Richard Lillick, and Alexander Keith, just to name a few. But equally important were the generations of students, some of whom are in the room here, that I've taught during my 43 years of teaching. They inspired and often challenged me to be better. Thank you all for that and for this award. It was really a wonderful time at the commission, and I think about it a lot even now. So
I'm happy to. So Dinah, I'm Lisa LaPointe, and
Hi, Lisa.
I was starting off in Peru, and it was your volume on remedies, which got me started on my own scholarship on reparations, which has,
You've
been
done
the
a lot
rest.
since then.
Yes, I have. So thank you for that amazing work and for helping me get clarity on my thinking while I was in Peru working on the theme of transitional justice and reparations and the importance. And it was one of the only resources, and certainly one of the only ones that was grounded in law.
Wow.
And so you very much influenced my work, so thank you.
Thank you. That was one of the volumes that I wrote that actually was inspired by a student question. Because in my human rights class, one day, I was lecturing and discussing the European Court of Human Rights. And one of the students came up afterwards and said, well, what do the victims get out of this? It's the end of the process. And I said, that's a good paper topic. Why don't you write about them? And she did. And the paper challenged me to think about the issue of remedies. And it led to a 10-year project to write that book. Mm-hmm. So students make a very important contribution. Thank you for your remarks.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
My name is Rose Remo, and I'm a professor at Georgia State University College of Law. And I've practiced law in Paris. And I see that you've taught at some of the universities and also in Ghana. I have a question for you, because recently I was in South Africa and I had the privilege to go see Robben Island, and I almost could not finish the tour.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you also had the same privilege to see where Mandela was held.
I did not get to see Robben Island. He talked about it quite a bit, but there were things that he didn't like to talk about because he was in solitary a large part of the time. I did visit the island of Gorée off the coast of Senegal, and I saw the departure venue for the slaves who were shipped across the transatlantic, and that was a very hard tour as well. So I do understand your feelings about going there.
And I have one small request. I love your photo with Mandela. If you wouldn't mind taking a photo with me as well, because years from now, I will be showing your photo in myself. I'm from Haiti, by the way.
Oh, you are?
Yes.
Oh, I really enjoyed being the rapporteur for Haiti.
Yes.
For those of you that don't know me, my name is Rosa Celorio, and I actually have had the honor of working with Dinah in a lot of capacities. I'm actually the Dean of International Law now at UW Law School, but I also saw her when she was a commissioner and president of the Inter-American Commission.
Canada together.
We went to Canada together, we went to Suriname together, and we've done a lot of things together. And I just want to say, Dinah, first of all, for me, it's been one of my life's honors to work with you and to learn from you. And I also wanted to tell you that one thing that I've always admired about you is not only the fact that you're an icon to all of us when it comes to human rights and scholarship, but also as a practitioner. You were incredible as a commissioner, but how generous you are with your knowledge and expertise, and how many people you have mentored over the years, including me. I owe you so much about how I am, as a human rights person, but also my career. And I just want to thank you because, you know, that's not always the case. You know, you don't always have these incredible luminaries that are very willing to support and mentor and share expertise, you know, in the way that you have with me and with many of our students. I work at GW, and she's a legend at GW. You know, students are always talking about her, but not only about her expertise, but also how kind she was to them. So that's very important. So thank you.
For accepting the offer to come to GW.
My honor.
Yes.
Congratulations, Professor Shelton, on your award. You deserve, no doubt. My interest is piqued when I hear the name Suriname because my application for a Fulbright to Suriname has passed peer review, and I'm hopeful that I'll go there in August and learn and teach. So I will look for particularly that inter-American group of which they are members, and pay no attention to, and what needs to be done about that, and a lot of so and I'm sure you've written on these subjects, and I'll be really guided to look them up and do what I can when that arises.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I haven't written that much about the on-site mission to Suriname because since it was based in petitions and the petitions are confidential, we can't release information about them. But I will tell you that the situation of the indigenous in Suriname needs tremendous work. The Surinamese have a constitution that they say guarantees that each individual is equal. Therefore, there are no indigenous people and nobody needs special rights, which is a mistake to begin with because indigenous don't get special rights.
That'll be one of my topics, the treatment of indigenous persons, which we in the United States don't have the greatest record on.
Right.
So that's definitely one of the things I put there. And just a quickie, I've also had the pleasure of teaching in Pretoria, pre-Mandela, and wrote something about that. A critical legal studies thing that, hey, the existing Dutch system, is attackable because it indicates that is correct. See, critical legal studies stuff. Anyway, I wrote an article on it. I'm going to sit down, but we're delighted that you are so.
Lisa, you could also look into the failure of the reparation system in South Africa and the futures of the aid, because it hasn't worked very well.
Failure of the okay. Thank you much.
Okay, yes.
Quick question. My name is Melina Stereo. I'm a professor at Cleveland State University. I teach international law, human rights, and I had a question for you about environmental justice. Mm-hmm. So recently we've seen an effort to essentially have an ICJ advisory opinion on essentially states' legal obligations to protect the environment. There are multiple complaints in the European Court of Human Rights. There are complaints, I believe, in the inter-American system as well. Do you call that progress? Are you hopeful that sort of more will be achieved at least on the legal front when it comes to the obligations of states to protect their citizens and to protect the environment? Thank you.
The Inter-American Court has already issued one advisory opinion on the environment, and they currently have a request for an advisory opinion specifically on the obligations of states in the context of the climate emergency. And I have written an amicus for that brief, and I'm hoping that I'll be called to testify in the oral hearing, which they said will be in Barbados. So I'm looking forward to that. But yes, I do consider this to be a big advance. I wrote my first article about the human rights and the environment in 1986. Published in Stanford Law Review. And I've been writing on it continually, periodically since then. And I really believe that without the environment, there's no water. It's a question of what quality of environment, because everybody has an environment. It's just that people in the Delta region of Louisiana, they have a horrific environment. They're breathing toxic air every day. People who live in the Oakland Hills, they have a very good environment because the sea breeze brings the fog in every night and cleans the air out. So it's a question of whether we want to have a good environment, a better environment, a livable environment, and what do those terms mean? You've got the environmental school, so you've been looking at this a lot, but I really hope that the court will provide more clarity on this issue.
Other comments or questions that anyone might have?
Well, I can see
Is
you
there another?
thinking about it.
Well, sure, absolutely. So I guess I just want to say that you've been someone that I've looked to for my entire career as an example. I do a lot of work in Guatemala, and of course your work there has had such a deep impact on that country. Probably, I've done extensive field research there, and it's so clear to me the work of the Inter-American Commission had a dramatic effect within that country, from the mouths of the judges and the prosecutors who push forward the cases that are truly groundbreaking there. And it really, that example really taught me in a moment where international law feels so fragile, that it still has value. And this event reminded me of that. And I guess I just want to say that it's such a pleasure to see you receive this award, and you deeply deserve it. And so thank you so much for honoring us with your presence.
Guatemala was a particularly hard on-site mission because while we were there, one of the indigenous leaders was killed by a mob, and we tried to get an emergency declaration out of the commission, but the president was not available, and so we couldn't get anything from him until it was too late. And that always has stayed with me, that we couldn't rescue this man before he was killed. So Guatemala is a really serious situation still. Thank you.
Professor Shelton, I have another question for you. Since I know you've worked as a rapporteur for Haiti, I don't know if you follow recently the border dispute between Haiti and Dominican Republic.
It's awful.
And
The Dominicans are behaving so badly. They had taken away the citizenship of many people who were not only born in Haiti, but their parents were born in Haiti. And they denaturalized whole swaths of the population. It's a dreadful situation. And the Dominicans are fully responsible for all the violations that have taken place in that country.
I guess I don't have much of a question. I definitely don't, because I was going to go back to the Treaty of 1929 that they signed, and because the spot that the Haitians are trying to irrigate the water is where Trujillo, the former dictator, that's where they had massacred all the 20,000 Haitians. So now to say that the Haitians are violating international law for irrigating water to help them better with agriculture, which is really what the canal was actually for. So I'm wondering, where is the violation of international law? But I don't have to ask.
I've never been shy about making my opinions known, including on the commission, but unfortunately, sometimes to my detriment.
Other comments? We have time, so if people want to make some comments.
I have a question.
Yeah. Or question.
I'm very concerned at this moment about the U.S.'s engagement or lack thereof with the Inter-American Commission and the Inter-American Commission's future more generally. And so I'm curious with your... What's that? Oh, no problem. So essentially, I'm very, very nervous in this moment because it seems like the U.S. is sort of in this posture of disengagement from the Inter-American Commission. You were elected, but we have not had success in electing U.S. Representatives to the Commission in recent times, in part because the U.S. is unwilling to use its political muscle to do so. And I also sort of am reflecting on some of the backsliding that I think is happening, you know, in the OAS. And I wondered if you had, given your long legacy there, any words of wisdom in terms of how we can encourage our government to re-engage.
I don't know the words of wisdom, but I will share with you that the U.S. had a candidate for the commission this year, and they withdrew him at the last minute because of an unfortunate set of circumstances, and it was too late for them to nominate anybody else. But they were very hopeful, despite the U.S. record on non-ratification of human rights treaties, which is a big stumbling block for many countries. They say if you want to get somebody on the commission, you need to ratify at least one of the instruments. And I made this argument to Harold Coe when he was legal advisor in the State Department. And he said, well, if you can count to 67, I'll put it up there before the Senate. And all he was doing was counting votes to see if the treaty would get through. And he wasn't going to take any of the leadership if the votes were not already there. And so I think that's partly responsible for the U.S. lack of a commissioner in recent years. They have nominated a couple of really good people recently who were elected, and I think part of the problem was they didn't really campaign as they did for me. I was taken around to all the missions to meet all of the legal advisors for the various countries, and they really pushed hard to get me on the commission. Even so, I only won by one vote. So.
I'm going to follow up on that. There's a group of us in Boston, group of law schools that have formed a coalition with the idea of creating a student-led movement towards ratification. It's in the beginning stages, and we have a meeting tentatively set up with a commissioner whose name escapes me in the moment, but I'm thinking, and we've had visits with the president of the Inter-American Court in trying to get different clinics across the nation to rally their students to be a part of this movement, to raise awareness of the importance of the convention and the importance of ratification. So just letting people know if there's any other law schools that are interested. It's just in the beginning stages, but hopefully we'll get it back on the agenda.
Well, my argument I met with Senator Kaine and Senator Warner about these issues, and my argument to them was the torture treaty, the OAS torture treaty, is modeled exactly after the UN torture treaty, which we sponsored. The Violence Against Women treaty is all based on U.S. legislation. There's no reason on earth why we can't ratify those two instruments. It makes no sense.
Assuming the Democrats would retain Congress in the future, what about the idea of an executive congressional agreement as a way to get around the supermajority requirement?
Well, I think if you go back to the debate over congressional executive agreements way back when in the 70s, one of the things they said was that human rights treaties would generally not be appropriate for that kind of action. It was more for postal agreements, technical agreements, but nothing that would in any way change U.S. policy. It's an idea, but I don't think it would go very far, and it would probably rile up some members of Congress more than be worth. Yes.
Another question, but I think we have a few more minutes. So I wanted to ask a little bit more about your experience as a woman in this field. There weren't as many female experts in international law and human rights, certainly in the 80s or in the 90s, and fast forward to today. While there are many of us in this room, I don't think that there are enough women in, leadership positions, and when it comes to judgeships, and we could have a whole other panel or symposium on that subject. So, what has been your experience as a woman in the field, and what would be your advice to other more junior women in the field trying to reach those leadership positions?
Well, I'll tell you, when I went to law school, I went to Berkeley, and in my class in law school, there were only 12 women total. And, we used to evaluate the various professors according to how they behaved in class. And there was one torts professor who was notorious for only calling on women when he was doing rape and seduction cases. He was really bad. I graduated and went to Strasbourg for 2.5 years to work with Renee Cassin on the European Court of Human Rights. And while there, one of my obligations at the Institute was to prepare various conferences. So I was preparing one that was going to be a conference on the role of Catholicism in human rights, pro or con. And so I got the whole thing organized in Munich, and at the last minute, Carol Vasek told me I couldn't go because there would be no women, there would only be priests, and they wouldn't feel comfortable having a woman in the room. So I was disinvited to a human rights conference that I had organized. So that was my second experience. Then at the UN, I felt the situation was getting better. On the commission, it was a mixed bag. When I arrived, I was one of only 2 women on the commission, and within 2 years, we had a majority. We had 4 women. And to celebrate, Hillary Clinton invited us to the State Department to meet with her. The morning that we were to go, the bus came to pick us up, and it circled by a hotel, and I saw the Secretary General of the Commission and 3 of the men up there, and what are you doing here? They had crashed our invitation. They said, we've never been invited, so we have to go. And so they just crashed in and went. And on the commission itself, I noticed that some men were very condescending, some were very welcoming. It just depended on the person. But on the whole, I think Latin American men have a long way to go. And they were all Latin American men. The women who were elected came in from the Caribbean. By and large, there were 2 of them, and then there was a woman from Paraguay who was not a lawyer. And I think that was as problematic as her gender, because she never saw a child whose rights were not being violated in some way or another. Every petitioner had somebody under 18, had multiple violations in her mind. And I had so many arguments with her over this. At one point I said, if you mention children one more time, I'm gonna go home and kick my granddaughter. Of course, I was joking, but my granddaughter didn't even live with me. But I think the situation is improved. The fact that Hillary Clinton could invite 4 women down on the Inter-American Commission, that was a first. And since then, a judge from the Inter-American Court has been elected to the commission and is president, and that's a wonderful advance to have that relationship between the court and the commission. I hope it will continue like that. I'm pretty satisfied with where we are, but I know there's a lot more work to be done. And WILIG, when we started out, WILIG, I don't know if you know about WILIG, it's the Women in International Law. When we started, there were 4 of us who got together on the 75th ASIL annual meeting. And we challenged the organizer of it. Why are there no women on any of the panels, except for one woman who's not an American? Is it the American Society of International Law or not? And he said, well, we couldn't find any qualified women. We were so angry. We immediately started this women's interest group. And the last time I was there, which wasn't last year, it was a year before, the room had at least 100 people in it. It's grown so much and it's become so influential in the society. So really hats off to all the women who have come after and followed.
Any other comments? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.